that was the second video. Ended up getting, another 1 million views. And I just kept going. And slowly I started expanding into topics like what financial books you should read, how you can travel smarter with the right credit card, where to make sure that you are getting the best discounts. Like, it became a full 360 of anything with a dollar sign, I'll talk about it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forbes Top Creators. I'm Forbes Assistant Managing Editor Stephen Bertoni, and today we have Vivian 2, aka your Rich BFF. Now, Vivian is the digital expert, the social media expert about finance. She has millions of followers, her own podcast. She's a best-selling author. One of your recent guests called you the Taylor Swift of finance. I'm stealing that. Vivian 2, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
This is great. So you're like old school Forbes now. You were at under 30.
Yep.
You were a top creator.
Yep.
You just came to our party last Monday. Thank you.
That's right.
And you just got married.
I did.
So congratulations.
Yes, all very equal accomplishments for me. The marriage, top creators, Forbes,
Yes. And you met your partner before you were all this Forbes stuff. So he's not just chasing the Forbes vibe.
No, definitely not chasing the clout. He liked me when I had 2 nickels to rub together, no followers, and a cockroach infested apartment in Soho.
That is true love.
Yeah, that's right.
When my wife met me, I was employed, but I was homeless. I was living on an aerobed in one of my friend's apartments because I had moved out of another relationship. And then a few weeks later, I got laid off. And I'm like, I'm going to be a journalist. And she's like, okay, and stuck with me, which is, I would have bolted, but
turned out okay for her.
So far, so good. It worked. So let's talk about, we have very similar backgrounds.
Yeah.
In work-wise with very different outcomes. We were both in finance, in equity.
Yep.
I left for media.
Yep.
You left for media, but in a much bigger, better paying way. So congrats to that.
I worked in sales. So when I left.
Tell me, what did you do in finance? Because,
So I started my career on Wall Street. I was an equities trader, which is just a fancy way of saying I traded stocks.
Yes.
I worked at JP Morgan, and it was great. It was great for the first, year and a half. But then ultimately the head of my desk got let go.
Okay.
There was a shakeup. Things happen. But I was taken away from my manager, who I really, really loved. She's still my mentor to this day, and assigned to someone new who didn't really respect me, didn't treat me with respect, didn't, treat me with dignity, frankly. And I knew it was time to go.
Were you in sales? Were you a sales trader?
I was in trading, official trading.
Like a trader, like a block trader.
Yeah.
I'm in the business. I was in the business I was on the edge of the business. Tell me.
Syndicate?
No, I was U.S. listed stock exchange, but on the floor. Like I back when I traded.
You were floor broker.
Floor broker I was a floor clerk for Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
But we used to trade. It was like we were trading Intel on paper tickets. Like that's how backwards it was.
Gotcha.
So the goal was like you work on the floor and work your way up.
Yeah.
And then technology came by and just like we don't need any of you anymore. So I got laid off, thankfully. But in terms of what was like your day to day as a trader, kind of in this technology world, because like these were algorithms back then. This is in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So I would rock up to the office at 5:45. I had to wake up at like 5 or so to make that happen. It was always 5:45 because if I got in before 6, I could expense my Uber.
Nice.
But then
and breakfast maybe, or just the Uber?
No, just the Uber.
Gotcha.
I had to pay for my own breakfast at the company cafeteria, which was subsidized.
True.
But the food was also very bad.
Yes.
And I would start my day by just reading all of the research that had come out overnight. Especially in particular, I was focusing on the industrials, materials, and energy category.
Okay.
So anything that had come out with that, especially if it was earnings season, I would honestly might even get in a little earlier just to digest all of that. And then we would send out notes to our clients, so hedge funds, asset managers, pension funds, anything like that. And then around 7:30, I would go grab breakfast. I'd come back, make sure that the day was kind of set up. So if I had any positions from the previous day, I was ready to buy or sell whatever I wanted to do with them or hold on to them, what have you. And then any early tickets that would come in, I would have on, my computer screen and be ready to trade them. And by that, I just mean click some buttons. Yeah. You would do 2 different types of trading, one on behalf of someone else, as well as, in our internal books. Okay. One of which is
you can still do that. That's good.
You can to an extent. It's not the same. You're not prop trading the way that we were back in the 80s or 90s, but it was okay to take a position and have a view as a desk.
Yes.
You would, have stuff.
And to be clear, for everyone watching and listening, this is, it's called institutional trading. So you're not trading like my stock. These are like, you're dealing with other like pension funds, mutual funds, hedge funds. You're moving.
Family offices for high net worth people, everybody. But this is for very much what you would consider sophisticated clients.
Yes.
And then I would trade throughout the day and market would open at 9:30 to 4. So I'd be kind of tied to the desk for that amount of time. And then at 4, the market would close and everybody would deep sigh of relief. And I would run the P&L for the desk. I was the youngest person. So that was the grunt work that I had to do.
Doing the clerical stuff.
You got it. And once that was over, around 6 or so, if there was a client event that I had to be at, we would go to a bar or a restaurant. Otherwise, I would go home and try to hopefully get a workout in.
Nice. Where did you study? Were you in one of those like feeder programs from college?
Yeah.
Where'd you go? What'd you study and how'd you get into JP Morgan?
Yeah.
That's a huge brand. That's like where people want to go.
Yeah. I studied at the University of Chicago.
Okay.
I was a public policy and environmental studies double major.
No math in University of Chicago?
I mean, I could have been a math major if I wanted to become a professor or
there you go.
think about theory, but I wanted to have a little bit more of like a practical life.
Okay.
And ultimately that made a lot of sense because public policy allowed me to focus on finance. We don't pre-professionalize, so there were no finance majors.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the environmental studies piece was just because I was interested in energy and how the world worked and how we powered things. And so funny, most of my peers ended up going to become the heads of NGOs. And I came from an immigrant background. I had 2 parents that basically looked me in the eye and said, as soon as you graduate from college, don't look to us for a single dollar. And I was like, I need a job that makes money.
So like when you call it, you're off. My dad calls it off scholarship. You're off scholarship. You get the degree and that's it. You're on your own.
Exactly. And so then I knew I needed a job that was going to pay and hopefully a job that I liked doing that could pay. And because all of the mentors that we had in college, like the older students, the girls in my sorority, they ended up going and getting Wall Street jobs. I thought, good enough for them, good enough for me.
Perfect. Give me one really good thing you liked about Wall Street and one really bad thing that you did not like.
Yeah. So really good thing. I think it gave me a work ethic that you can't buy. I cut my teeth in an environment where everyone was used to working a 12 to 14 hour day. And ultimately, when I was starting Your Rich BFF, there were days that I was like, I don't really feel like making a video today, or I don't really feel like responding to this email, but I would just like grit my teeth and do it. And I think that's in part why I've been able to grow so quickly and for for such a consistent period is on days when I don't feel like showing up, I still do. Bad thing, I think Wall Street also really showed me that things weren't as rosy as I thought. There were going to be people who judged me based on how I looked, my identity. There were going to be people who underestimated me. My mentor even had to pull me aside. Like in the first couple months of working together, she said, listen, you're going to start getting invited to client events. I don't care what time you go home, but you tell everyone on the desk the next day you left a little bit before midnight. And I'm like, why do I have to lie about when I got home? And she said, because when you are a young woman on this team, you have to be beyond reproach. You're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And that kind of sucks to hear out loud. But
she said that to you like point blank.
She said it to me point blank.
Okay.
And I'm so grateful that she did because a lot of us don't like to hear that, but it's true. And so knowing that in my mind, I was able to really strategize around what I would and wouldn't share, what I would and wouldn't say. And I'm so grateful to have had someone to kind of guide me in the right direction.
So you felt like you really had to be on your guard and really kind of almost create like a shield around you.
In the same way that Your Rich BFF, I credit a lot of the success to personal branding.
Yes.
I had to have a personal brand at work, my work persona, and it wasn't who I actually was.
Gotcha. And I would say, and your Rich BFF is so outspoken in a good way. Now, is that also work persona, or is that more you, or is that like an exaggerated you? I
think with Your Rich BFF, obviously, I can be a lot more myself than I was able to be, sitting in a suit on my Wall Street trading desk. I think there are still things that have taken me a little bit of time. My team actually has been integral, whether it be my agents, my management, my publicists, like integral in being like, hey, you can share things about your own personal life, because I was so guarded when I started. It was truly just information. And now suddenly I'm talking about medical bills, but also sharing that I went through an egg freezing journey. I'm talking about, how to budget, but also showing people how I worked in my honeymoon to my budget. And I think that's actually just deepened my relationship with my audience. So it's worked out really nicely.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. You actually not just mentioned your egg freezing, but you documented the whole thing. Talk to me about that. Like, was that something you planned to do? Is that something you felt like it's people are doing, but no one's talking about, so you want to kind of normalize it? Like, what was the decision? And were you like not sure about it at first? Like, whoa, is this way too much? Because that's, I mean, anything medical and,
it's super intimate.
It's intimate. Yeah. And very personal. Like, and usually very private.
Yeah. I think it's because when I walked in and did my first consult, I was so excited. And then they showed the rough outline of what it would cost. And I am so grateful. Like, it's no surprise. Like, Forbes has even reported some of my earnings. Yeah. Like, people know that I make a great living. I balked at that number. I was like, are you joking? Like, who can afford this? Can I afford this? And that really made me sad. Because if someone who's earning as high a number as I am feels this way about, how much this process is going to cost, what about everybody else? And so I ended up documenting it. We actually have a podcast episode where I'm going to be explaining exactly how much every single step spent was and what I had to do, what the emotional toll, what the financial toll was. And I think it's because I have seen other people's egg freezing journeys, but no one's really talked about the money portion of it yet. And I talked to my husband. I made sure that we were both really comfortable with it. And I actually delayed post everything.
Gotcha.
So I made sure that I went through the process. I was comfortable. I was happy with how things turned out, because I think I'm very grateful. I was able to get a really great retrieval, really great number of eggs. If I had gotten worse news, I don't know if I would have been as comfortable sharing that.
I gotcha.
That vulnerability is still quite scary to, I think, everybody. But I'm happy that I was able to share the journey. And I got so many DMs that were like, thank you for doing this. Like, nobody talks about this. And like, seeing you go through this makes it less scary for me.
What was the total cost? I'm curious.
Yeah, all in roughly $25,000.
$25,000.
So it's typically roughly $4,000 to $6,000 for the medication that you have to inject in yourself.
Gotcha.
You obviously have a bunch of different blood work and tests that need to be done ahead of all of that. That's, low thousands. The annual freezing cost is $1,000 to keep the eggs on ice. And then the overall process of actually having the retrieval done is, 15 to 20. And then ultimately after that, if you do end up using those embryos or those eggs, it's another $10,000.
That's a whole other process.
Yeah. So it's like the all in for me thus far has been roughly $25,000. But in the future, it will cost more if I, choose to utilize them.
Well, you're the tax expert. By making a content, you get to write the whole thing off?
Not quite. I wish. No, obviously, it has to be clear and conspicuous only for business. That was very clearly a personal decision.
Yes, obviously. So I want to kind of jump back for a second. So you were, in this very intense Wall Street job.
Yeah.
And then your boss left, you decided to have it, switch it up, and then you moved to media, but on media sales, right? You're in BuzzFeed.
Yes. So I worked in digital media strategy sales. Okay. So I was working, covering clients, specifically in the travel, entertainment, and political space. And what we would do is do everything as simple as literally selling banner ads on the BuzzFeed website, to writing posts, to making custom videos, all the way to doing IRL pop-ups in Flatiron and doing full joint business ventures to create new products for some of these clients. So everything I did was kind of different every single day, which I loved.
Yeah, creative, different, very different than the kind of the grind of the floor.
Yeah. I mean, the grind of the floor was fun too, right? Like, I think working and trading, like, every day is different, right? Some days are amazing. You make a ton of money. Yep. Some days are completely unpredictable. Some days you kind of lose money. But that's, I think, what I've always been chasing with a job is, like, I get bored very easily.
Yes.
So the first job, very exciting, very different. Second job, still very exciting, covering all these different clients, getting to do all of these different things. And then my current job, being Your Rich BFF. Yep. Every day is different.
How'd you now take me from BuzzFeed, where you said it was creative, super fun, and then to your first post? What led to and you got lucky too, not lucky, but you got viral early as well, which is very interesting. But
first video. Yes. So I did get lucky.
Yes. which is rare. I talked to like a lot of people on the show and they said like, I posted 3 times a day I posted for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then I finally got that moment. You kind of had that first swing grand slam sort of thing. What led you to making the videos?
Yeah. So I wanted friendship at BuzzFeed desperately because there wasn't like a starting analyst class like there typically is on Wall Street. So I was like, okay, I need to make friends. And so I mentioned that I had come from a Wall Street background, and all of the new people that I was sitting with at lunch were like, Wall Street, you're about to rebalance my 401k. You were about to help me with all of these things that I don't understand. And I did. And ultimately, one of my girlfriends at work, she's still one of my best friends to this day, she was like, I really think you need to put this on the internet. And I said, people will laugh at me. Absolutely not.
Yes.
She was the largest influencer I personally knew at the time. She had 10,000 followers on Instagram. She was a foodie blogger, but it wasn't her full-time gig. She just kind of did it for fun.
Yeah, like doing it, yeah.
But one day for lunch, she took me to this restaurant and we got to walk out without paying the bill. All she had to do was take some photos and post about it. And I was like, is this legal? Like, how are we doing this? And she was like,
it's like dine and dash.
I was like, are we dining and dashing? And she was like, no. And then ultimately she just said like, I really think you should do this. And I was like, okay, fine, leave me alone. January 1st of 2021, as a New Year's resolution, kind of between me and her, I told her, I was like, I'll make one video.
Yep. And by the 20, I'm just trying, my brain gets like all confused with COVID. This was like peak COVID, right? Or was it, were we out then, or were we still like really in our houses?
This was like 9 months into COVID.
Yeah. So we're still in our
houses.
Vaccines are starting to come out, but not really out.
Yeah. Okay. They're not really out yet. And so I post this video. And for the first 7 hours, nothing. It was like, got 7 views.
And it was on TikTok.
Just TikTok.
What was the topic?
It was me saying, hey guys, like I'm seeing some real bad advice going around. Do not put your stimulus check into Tesla calls. Do not put it into Bitcoin. Do not be an idiot. But like I worked on Wall Street. It's not that hard to be good with your money. And I can teach you there's no such thing as a get rich quick scheme.
Yep.
Anybody promising you there is one is a scammer. Like if you want to learn more, follow me. And that was the whole video. And
that was it. No, just you talking to the camera.
Me talking to the camera. If you actually watch it back, I listened to it the other day. My voice is shaking so bad. I'm like so scared and so nervous. And like this was before I realized there were things like teleprompters or ring lights or like the gimbal that you can hold so it doesn't look like, you're just like in an earthquake.
Is that it's like a gyroscope thing?
It's like it's like the chicken head.
Okay.
That prevents your hand from shaking. And it's so funny. This video is so poorly made. It has no closed captioning. There is one text at the beginning and that's it. Like I would never put out a video that looks like that now.
Yeah.
But I put that out. First 7 hours, nothing. But then I was watching a movie that night with my then boyfriend, not even fiance, then boyfriend, now husband. And suddenly my phone starts buzzing and it starts to get really hot. And I'm like, why is my phone about to explode? I open it up. I'm like, that's kind of strange. Like I have a couple thousand followers on TikTok. Like that's more followers than I have on my personal Instagram where I know every single one of these people. Like I don't know this many people.
Yeah, and you probably had that for years.
Yeah.
You've had this thing for like a day.
Yeah, literally. And I'm like, that's kind of strange. And then I put it over and I'm like, okay. After the movie, I open it back up. I'm like, wait, why do I have 17,000 followers on TikTok? That's more people than I've ever met.
Yes.
And that video ended up getting 3 million views. And by the end of the week, I had 100,000 followers.
That's insane.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about that video or about you that really struck a chord? Or was it just get picked up in the algorithm and just went, who knows? It's kind of like a pinball machine.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because I was so honest. I cut through the shit. Like you had so many 15-year-old boys in their mom's basements who had no credentials, no background, no financial education, telling people to do certain things. And people for once were like, oh, this girl doesn't sound like she's trying to scam me. She doesn't sound like she's trying to sell anything. Like she has the chops to back it up and like, I'm willing to listen. And I think finance at that point also, like I think it was partially good timing because people were very conscious about their money mid-pandemic when people had lost their jobs. People were like worried about being evicted. People were having trouble affording groceries. And so money was on everybody's mind.
And then on the other side, you had like the Wall Street bets people.
Oh my God.
Like diamond hands and saying like the YOLOing everything. So you had people, half the world was taking their checks and being like, thank goodness I'm saved.
And the other half were gambling.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But I think it was a very of the moment topic. And I got lucky because the timing was good. I didn't plan that. But I think it was the fact that I continued to post every single day since then that's really, really paid off for
Yeah,
me.
I was going to ask, okay, so you did this fluke thing because your friend,
Yeah.
you got a free meal.
Yeah,
and
I got
you're
a free meal.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to post, you're nervous, you're shaking, and then you get 3 million views.
Yeah.
What do you do on that's Monday. What do you do on Tuesday?
I called my friend and I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, look at what happened. Now I have to do this. Like, what is this?
Okay.
And she was like, make another video. I'm like, about what? And she was like, I don't know. You tell me. And I'm like, like, what would I recommend as someone's like step one? And so the next video I made ended up being about high yield savings accounts and how at that point you were going to be able to earn more from your bank. And it was risk-free as long as you made sure you were banking with someone that was FDIC insured. Like, I felt like that was foolproof advice.
Yes.
And so that was the second video. Ended up getting, another 1 million views. And I just kept going. And slowly I started expanding into topics like what financial books you should read, how you can travel smarter with the right credit card, where to make sure that you are getting the best discounts. Like, it became a full 360 of anything with a dollar sign, I'll talk about it.
Gotcha. So you're posting every day.
Every day.
I mean, the good news with finances, there's so many topics.
Yeah.
How would you come up with like the topic of the day? And would you ever be nervous being like, you're laying in bed the night before, like, oh shit, I need to like find like the topic for tomorrow?
Fortunately for me, I had a lot of friends who would constantly ask me questions. So I would just use their questions as fodder of like what I should talk about. Cause I'm like, if my friends are asking me this question, like other people want to know too. And also we have to remember, I had basically CTA'd my audience in the very first video being like, tell me what questions you want answered.
What does CTA mean?
Like call to action.
Call to action, gotcha.
Yeah, so I CTA'd my audience. I'm like, hey, tell me what you want to learn.
Okay.
And so I just went through the first videos, thousands of comments, and slowly one by one started knocking them off.
Well, just like total crowdsource.
Crowdsource the whole thing. And then I wasn't ever stressed about, do I have a video for tomorrow? But only because I was batch creating my content. So I still worked my full-time job Monday through Friday. And then on Saturdays, I would ideate 7 different concepts. And then on Sunday, I would put on a shirt, film a video, take off the shirt, put on a new shirt, film the second video. And then I would keep switching outfits. And everybody thought I was releasing a new video every single day, when in reality, I had filmed it over the course of a couple hours on a Sunday.
Wow, and just took care of the entire week.
Whole week.
When did you start making money from this?
Pretty quickly on. It certainly wasn't a lot of money, but pretty quickly on.
Who's your first deal? You remember that first deal?
Yeah, I do. The first deal that came to me was Wealthfront.
Okay.
They literally emailed me like the moment that first video went viral. It was crazy. And they were like, how much for 3 videos? I was like, what? And so I asked my girlfriend, I was like, what should I charge? Yeah. And she was like, ask for this. And I was like, okay. I asked for $1,500 for 3 videos. They negotiated me down to $1,200.
Gotcha.
And I was like, these idiots, I can't believe they would give me so much money for 3 videos. And it's so funny to say that out loud, because now I have a whole team that handles all of my negotiations. But
and I'm sure you're getting more than
$400 per video. Yes. Certainly.
And was the video just be like, hey guys, check out Wealthfront. They're really smart with XYZ. Like, was that?
No, it was just to like mention like, hey, like if you don't know how to invest, they have a robo-advisor that can help you do it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really great advice. Like that's truly advice that I would have given editorially.
Yes.
And so it was a good partnership. But then I had some conversations with other creators and I was like, I must be undercharging.
Gotcha.
And that's ultimately where I was able to kind of figure out my rate and get that up.
When did this become a full-time job? Like when did you leave? Because you were making a very good living at BuzzFeed, if I recall.
A very, very good living. The last year I was at BuzzFeed, I made $625,000, which is certainly a respectable living. I mean, more than.
Yeah.
And I felt so crazy to be leaving that job because I didn't have any of the other complaints that like other people had. Like I loved my boss. I loved what I was doing. I was fairly compensated. Like everything was going great. But it was March of 2022. I had come to the point where I was like, I hate my job. I hate your Rich BFF. I don't want to do either of these things anymore.
You hated them both.
Hated them both. And I said that to my now husband, and he was like, did it ever occur to you, like, you don't hate either of these things? Because you certainly liked your job before all this, and you certainly didn't hate your Rich BFF at the beginning when there wasn't so much pressure to like get stuff out and like, you know, respond to emails and do all this work. Like, you just hate doing them at the same time. And I was like, oh, perhaps that is correct. So
that's good partner advice.
Yes, it was excellent advice, but also it gave me an opportunity to think about like, what are my options? And I felt like I didn't want to be 50, 60 years old and look back on this moment and be like, what if? I had done a really good job at BuzzFeed. My manager and I had an incredible relationship. I had networked. I treated everyone really well. So like people liked me. And I was like, if this doesn't play out, I bet I can make a call and get this job back. Or if my boss leaves or something, he would come and take me.
Gotcha.
So I was like, let me just try this for a year. If it doesn't work, I'll go back into this business that I know I can make a great living at. I never went back.
That's amazing. That's a great luxury too, to have like follow a dream, but like your backup plan is also like really good.
Really lucrative. But also not only just the backup plan, I had a golden parachute. My husband still works in finance. I looked at him and I was like, what if I don't make any money? What if I can't afford my half of the rent? And he was like, well, we've been together like, 5 years. Like, I'm not going to let you go homeless or starve. Like, my income can cover the two of us. Like, I'll take care of it. And to have that golden parachute on my back, I was able to jump so much harder and just pour myself into everything versus being like, how am I going to afford my rent? And that's a luxury that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, you're not playing scared. You're not saying like,
I didn't have to.
I can take a chance. You're not just trying to like pay the bills.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not trying to create content that is just for the money.
I didn't have to take every deal.
Yeah.
That was so important to me because there were certainly lots of crypto companies and like sketchy, like, stuff that I didn't feel morally good about that came in the door.
Gotcha.
And I would turn them away, even if the money was incredible. But it was because I could afford to. I was operating out of a place of abundance and opportunity versus, scarcity.
How did you kind of how did your attitude and approach change to your Rich BFF when you focused on that solely and you weren't kind of pulled between BuzzFeed and your social media world? How did that change your mindset and how did that change operationally?
I mean, it was incredible. Like, I mentioned this earlier, but like I took that Wall Street ethic and suddenly I didn't have to juggle between two things that were competing for my attention. I could put 12, 14 hours a day towards one thing. And I was like, I'm going to make this thing the best thing that it can possibly be. And it was like, just like my eyes were wide open suddenly. And like, I had every opportunity at my fingertips. I made some really strategic hiring decisions, got an attorney, management.
Yeah, say, what was your team like? And what's your team like now?
Yeah. So I didn't have anybody except for my attorney when I quit. She was the first person I hired because I was like, I can't read through these contracts. Okay. Like, I need someone to help me.
Yeah.
Then I told her, I was like, hey, I'm getting like 50 emails a day. I don't even have enough time to read them all if I want to make content.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think you need a manager.
And these are emails coming in for opportunities, for brands, all that sort of thing?
Everything. Yes, everything. And she was like, I think you need a manager. So she sets up a couple like meetings for me with some managers. I end up choosing one. She's still my manager today.
Very cool.
And then a couple months down the line, I want to say 3 or 4 months, we started getting so many inbounds for opportunities that even she wasn't capable of vetting. So like at the beginning, it was just brands wanting to like work with me or opportunities for interviews. But suddenly it's like, we want you to write a book. We want you to have a podcast. Would you like to come on this TV show? And she was like, I think you need an agent.
Okay.
An agent that can be really niched down into specific things. And I'm like, okay. So she sets up speed dates with a bunch of agents and I end up picking an agency, WME.
Okay.
And I'm still there today. And I think for me, a big thing is like hiring slow and firing fast.
Okay.
So I took my time to find these people, but I am very loyal and I want them to be loyal to me. So I've kind of kept them as my business has really, really transformed. And now I have those 3 parties. And I say those 3 parties, like WME is comprised of like 13 different agents that rep my business. But
do they do your book as well? Because
they do my book, my podcast, TV stuff, speaking, they do everything. But I also have a publicist. I have a business manager. I have a full-time assistant who works with me, as well as an editor and a junior producer who helps with my podcast. Like, it's a huge team now. It's 20 people or so. And I never would have guessed that quitting my job would lead to this.
I know you're like, everyone always thinks like the more and more we're watching the creator world, it's growing and growing up. Like people still think like you see your video, it's like, I mean, it's good production, but like, oh, Vivian's doing like probably set up her ring light, but you have 20 people. There's a whole operation. You're like a band. You got roadies, you got managers. It's fascinating.
It used to be, I would ideate the concept. I would film the concept. I would edit the concept. I would then post the thing. Now, fortunately, I only have to do those first 2 steps because no one can ideate a finance concept like me.
Yeah.
That's not going to be something that I can certainly outsource. Until we have much better AI,
yes, exactly.
I cannot get rid of filming. But I have an editor who helps me with the editing.
Yep.
I have someone who's posting for me, so I don't actually have to click the buttons because they can do it just as well as I can, and I can free up those hours to go do other things that only I can do, like record my podcast or write my book. So I think it's really about delegating tasks that other people can do just as well as you can, and then focusing on what really requires your touch.
How do you get your ideas these days? Same way as before?
Same way as before, but also I'm just a really voracious reader.
Okay.
So like I read news headlines every single morning when I wake up. I go through all of my push notifications of all the news, like all of the main headlines, like I'm constantly consuming news so that I can then digest it and share it with my audience.
What is the life cycle of what's like the start and finish of one of your posts? Do you still, you're obviously big on Instagram and TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Do you like, how long does it take for like the idea of like, oh, I'm going to cover high yield savings into like scripting, filming, editing, and hitting the button?
It depends. The issue is there are certain concepts that I'm so excited to put out, and those happen so fast. I can ideate in 15 minutes, film it in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Can get it edited in 20 minutes, and it can be posted right then and there, like full like 1 hour from origination to post. Then there's concepts that I'm like, I've put it off for weeks and weeks and weeks. Ideation takes me like an hour plus. Filming it, I'm just like, ugh, and I keep putting it off.
Okay.
I get distracted. And that can take hours. That can take days, weeks. The craziest thing though is the stuff that I'm really excited about isn't always the stuff that does the best. There have been videos that I've put out that I'm like, not my best work. And I'm like, wait. Why does this have 7 million views? And I'm like, why is everyone looking at this video where I have no makeup on? My hair's not done. I literally didn't even have a script. I just directed to camera and posted. Like sometimes it's crazy. I'm like, I put 10 seconds into this and it got viral. And then there are things that I'm like really excited about. I've done the research on, and then I'm like, no one cared.
See, creators talk about that all the time, where they spent a week on this piece of content thinking it's going to break the internet, and it does nothing, and then something they slap up and do. And you know what? It's the same way for journalists. So when I first started, I was a magazine. I worked on the Forbes magazine like 16 years ago, printed on dead trees 28 times a year, which was, it was great and also bad in some ways. But when you print out the magazine story we got no feedback. Yeah. Like maybe you get letters in the mail, but like it was in the magazine and it's out to the public. Then we moved to digital and magazine, and suddenly everyone has like in the newsroom, they have like a leaderboard, right?
Yeah, and who got most clicks?
They gamify it. And sometimes you'll spend, 2 weeks on this crazy story and you're thinking it's going to do great, and it gets like 10,000 views. And then you do a quick, we used to call them blog posts, like based on, I forget, like I was drunk in my apartment and watching Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And Jesse Eisenberg was on. It was right at the Social Network, and Mark Zuckerberg did like a walk-on. So like they're both together. Yeah. And I remember just like sitting in my laptop because I was covering tech at the time, and I'm like, oh, like Mark Zuckerberg, and it got like 100,000 views, and I'm like, I just did this in like
on my couch
with a buzz on when it got more views than like when I was spent a week with a CEO of $1 billion company.
And you did hardcore, breaking news and
actually
research.
Reporting opposed to like almost just like a cultural thing. But you have to take as many swings as possible, and sometimes you strike out. Yeah. And by the way, just because it's not all about views either. Like maybe like the right people read that, but I'll never forget like on my couch in the dark writing about Saturday Night Live versus like in this like in West Texas with an oil pipeline billionaire, like sort of stuff. So it is very funny how that all works. How do you make money now?
Yeah, I've got a couple different sources. Okay. So the lion's share of my income still comes from brand partnerships. I get paid by the platforms to create great content that people want to watch.
So wait, what do you mean by the platforms pay you?
Like the TikTok creator fund.
Okay, very cool.
Instagram has bonuses for like threads and things like that. And then
Is that based on volume or based on they like what your content is and they think it's important to the community?
It's based on volume.
Okay.
There are certain parameters. It has to reach a certain number of views. It has to have a certain level of engagement, but they'll pay you for engagement above a certain amount, essentially. And again, it also differs by platform.
Yeah.
So brand partnerships by platforms. I got an advance on my books.
Yes.
I get paid for speaking gigs when I go and speak to corporates. I get ad revenue against my podcast. As well as, affiliate revenue through like things like an LTK or ShopMy or an Amazon. And then I also have a subscription service that people can sign on to read my newsletter on Substack.
You got it all going on.
Yeah.
It's like a whole empire. Who are your biggest brands right now? Your partnerships?
Yeah. Biggest partnerships are certainly people like SoFi and Marshalls. They are consistent. They come back every single year. We're signing partnerships for, year long, if not longer. And it really allows us the time to create content that isn't just so transactional and one-off.
Yes.
It allows us to really dive deeper into like, what is the message we're trying to send? And to your point, it gives us more swings at bat. And maybe one swing doesn't work out, but another one is an absolute walk-off grand slam. And that's okay because those two can even out and show still really, really great continued performance. And there's a reason, we keep working together. I love working with them and I've continued to give them strong ROI on their advertising dollars.
I love it. And let's talk about the book. I'm OG. This is the
that's not even the corrected version.
Uncorrected proof. Vivian signed it. Nice. So this is like, is it the same cover as the new one or is it?
It's the same cover as the official book, but it doesn't have the little white
Look
sticker.
at this. This is like an era in baseball cards. You got it. This is like uncorrected proof. Tell me about this book because it's the process of like the idea of batch shooting 60-second clips. That's like a whole tongue twister. And then sitting down and writing like a 300-page book. Very different part of the brain.
Yeah.
What made you want to do the book and kind of how did you get your ideas? And another interesting thing is that obviously you're on Wall Street, institutional trading, which a lot of times has nothing to do with personal finance.
Yes.
So how did you kind of sit down, do this and get ideas for it?
Yeah. Well, one, the reason I wrote the book was because the BFFs demanded it. Not requested, demanded.
Demanded, okay.
I was getting so many comments and DMs being like, where's the book? Like, you need to write a book. Like, we want a book. We want something that can be read from page 1 to the very last page and help me with my entire financial journey. These 60-second clips are great, but it doesn't give me the holistic view. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's a fair complaint. So ultimately, when I decided to write the book, if you read the beginning of it, I mentioned my mentor.
Yes.
She is the reason why I am strong in my personal finances, as well as my ability to have been a good employee on Wall Street. She taught me so many things that was an education I had never gotten anywhere else. My immigrant parents were very frugal. I was always good at budgeting and saving, but she was the first person to talk to me about investing, what a 401k was, like why I needed to have a Roth IRA, why I should be saving money here and there, and like things that I couldn't skimp on. And so this was kind of in part a love letter to her to say thank you, but also a love letter to all of the BFFs of being like, this was the book that I wish I had had when I had moved to New York and I didn't have two nickels to rub together. And it is a 101. If you want a place to springboard you on your financial journey, this is the book. This is why you should read it. And now we've sold over 150,000 copies.
I know it's funny. You're very like you're very self-effacing in the beginning. Be like, oh, like hopefully this will sell, but it became a bestseller.
It's a New York Times bestseller.
New York Times bestseller. You mentioned Forbes in the first sentence, so we appreciate in the first page. Appreciate that. How did you kind of like? There's so many finance books out there.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're inventing new things.
No. Yeah.
How did you, put your spin on finance, and how did you decide what goes into this?
Yeah. I think there are so many personal finance books out there, but there aren't that many personal finance books for the new generation.
Okay.
Back in our parents' generation, it was kind of easy. You could follow a blueprint. If you worked hard, if you got the right job, you could end up with the white picket fence house go on 2 vacations a year, have your happy little family of kids and a golden retriever, and retire at 60. Great. That doesn't really work for my generation anymore. Certainly not. No. The wages have stagnated.
Not going to work for me.
Not going to work. Not going to work. And so wages have stagnated. Home prices have skyrocketed. Yep. Educational costs are exponentially higher than they were when my parents went to college. There is a student debt crisis. There are more and more people getting into credit card debt. Like, it feels very doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But I'm here to sit here and say, you are allowed to have an internal locus of control and recognize that all of these factors certainly make it harder. I'm not disregarding that, but you can still do certain things to put yourself in the best financial position possible. And that's what makes this book different, is that it really addresses all of these realities and doesn't pretend like we live in a little vacuum where if you do the right thing, you can be rich. It's like, no, like there are going to be things stacked up against you. You can still win.
Did you read, you said you're a big reader. Mm-hmm. Did you read like every personal finance book out there, read every, personal?
I've read a lot of them.
A lot of them. And then kind of just take those lessons and distill it in? Or did you talk to experts in terms of?
Distilled it in, but also, we talk about like writing the book, how challenging that was. Yeah. It wasn't that challenging because when I signed my book deal for this book, I had already created content for over 2 years. And I wrote down every single script into one Word document.
Wow. Okay.
So I started writing this book with a 200-page single-space Word document versus a blank page.
Yes.
I didn't start with a blank page like most authors. I had stuff that I already wanted to talk about.
You did it reverse. Instead of turning like a book into a movie, you turned TikToks into a book. Yeah. Like 200 tiny movies into a book.
Yes, exactly. And so it made it a little bit easier for me to write this because I had already had a framework and also a feedback loop of what people actually cared about. And it's like, okay, these are the topics that hit. These are the topics that people struggle with. So I knew which chapters to make shorter and which ones to make longer.
Yep. You already basically had like full internet test.
I beta tested the book.
Yes, beta tested the book.
Yeah.
Although the one thing I don't agree on, the first sentence is that the American dream is a lie and dead. I think you're like the American dream.
I think the American dream has changed. Yeah. I think back in the day, it looked a very specific way. And that included a pinstripe suit and a briefcase.
Well, pinstripes are out.
Okay, please, don't hurt me.
Unless you're a Yankee.
Okay, first off, pinstripes are never out.
I guess for guys, it's kind of very like 2000s.
Okay, fair. This is all to say, like, I think the American dream has changed.
Yeah.
It included having this very like homogenous looking life of like, you live on Wisteria Lane, you have one breadwinner, one person stays home, you have 2.5 kids, tire swing out front.
Yeah.
That is not the American dream anymore. The American dream looks really different for all of us. I mean, look at me. I make money on the internet doing what? Like making little videos? Like, not to boil down.
No, you're the Taylor Swift of personal finance, according to your guests.
But like to boil down what I do, like I make money through my phone.
Yes.
That is a dream my ancestors could have ever thought of in their wildest imaginations. Like the American dream looks really different. It doesn't necessarily include the single family home that it used to. Some people want to retire at 30 and live in an Airstream and never buy shoes again.
Yes.
But I think
not my idea of retirement.
No, not even a little bit. I love shoes. I love not living in an Airstream. Yeah. But for some people, that's what it looks like. And so I think the American dream as we knew it is dead. I think we can still find each of our happily ever afters. And that's still very well and alive.
That's very cool. What you said, you have a deadline for a second book.
Yes.
And this, I feel like this is hot off the press already.
Yes.
What is the second book and how to come about?
So it's still in the works. My manuscript is due in February.
Okay.
But I'm working on kind of like a 201. So this was a 101 book. You get your money right. But what's the follow-up? How do we make sure that we are able to prioritize finances in all aspects of our life when it comes to our families and when it comes to building generational wealth?
Nice.
So book 2 is kind of the next level up.
I have to ask you a question because like in some ways at Forbes, like I'm not jealous, but I think Forbes is kind of like jealous of what you're doing in a way, in a good way, because, I remember we tried to create like a millennial money series, which you do what you do. So Forbes has this giant platform and we wrote stories.
Yeah.
with the Forbes knowledge and advice on like millennials on how to build. And it was very static. But you took probably the same kind of information, but you really, through your persona, through your community, really connect. And I'm sure you've touched many more people and probably have made a lot more money than what our goal is in terms of like reach or what mainstream media is. You're doing more than all mainstream media when they try to connect with the younger generation. You have that.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? What advice do you have for Forbes or for mainstream media to like use your, the power of personality, the power of connection, the power of community to reach the audiences?
People don't like brands. People like people. So I think,
but brands are also important.
Brands are also important, but hear me out.
Yes.
If you want to connect with an audience and have a series like this, I think what you're currently doing is very smart. You are becoming the person that people can like.
I'm trying, everyone. Keep on tuning in. Let's go.
But like, people don't necessarily have to be like, oh, this is by Forbes. They'll be like, oh, like I love watching Steve. Steve is the best. And that actually compels people to come back week after week, as opposed to a relatively commodified service of news.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm not any different or smarter or cooler than any of these news services. Like, they probably are getting the information way before I do. And frankly, I'm the one just reading it and digesting it. Mm-hmm. But people are willing to watch me over them because they know I went through an egg freezing journey. They know that we both love certain foods and hate others. They have a connection to me. They have a reason to tune in. And so I think to your, what I've certainly seen on social media thus far is you building out your personal brand in alignment to Forbes is going to actually make the company more powerful and be able to connect with an audience better.
All right. So if you were maybe we'll offer you a job. If you were the head social media content person at Forbes, or at any like, again, brands offer a lot of credibility, but they don't offer the connection.
Yeah.
So if you were in charge of like social media for a mainstream, business, finance, or even just news, organization, what would be the first thing you do?
I would create a series highlighting key players in certain products. So if I were to go to a large beauty brand, right? I would then go in and be like, okay, who is the head of the lipsticks or this specific lipstick? And you are going to share with me all of the pain points. You are going to share with me on camera. You're going to share with me the process of how the wax goes in the tube and then is smushed into this shape and then has this logo stamped on it. And then you can twist it up. Like, you're going to show me exactly how that's made.
Yep.
You're going to tell me about every pain point. You're going to share with me like the people in the warehouse packaging it. You're going to show me every step of the process because you don't want just the final destination anymore. People want the journey. They want to feel like they built it with you.
The story behind it all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I've been really cognizant of that. Like, when I talk about our community, I say we. I don't say I don't say my.
Yep.
I say our, we, because I didn't build this alone. I have over 8 million people who have supported me, and without their support, this wouldn't exist. It's
amazing. And what about media? Because I think this everyone saw this coming, but I think I'm not going political here, but this election, I think, really shook up people. Not that you have a podcast, not that podcast decided this election, but they suddenly saw Trump going on Joe Rogan or Kamala going on Alex Cooper, and getting more reaction and more connection than if they went on like whatever the old gatekeepers were, like the 60 Minutes, the Meet the Press. Like, what can media do to kind of all these companies have this great credibility, but they don't have that connection? Is it like, what would you do for a newsroom?
I mean, I would meet people where they're at. I see some news organizations doing this already, but like at the moment that you are also releasing like the breaking news on paper in text, you have to have a video component. You have to have a visual component because that's not how people are consuming anymore, right? Like, back in the heydays of like Tumblr, people.
I remember that.
Like people were scrolling and like sort of reading these long text-based platforms. People were reading their emails, but now everybody has such a short attention span. You have to meet them where they're at. You have to hook them. You have to get them interested, and you have to essentially be where they are consuming most of their time. And each of these media platforms has their own app, maybe has their own site, but you do have to play with a lot of those big platforms like an Instagram or a Facebook or a TikTok, because that is where the watch time is.
Fascinating. You have so many things going on, books, podcasts, you're posting all the time. Where do you kind of want this all to go? Or are you very happy? Does it have to go anywhere? Are you very happy where it's going? Like, what do you see this, your reputation and your brand ultimately, becoming?
Yeah, I think ultimately I want Your Rich BFF to be something that can help individuals like in their every single day with finances. I think all of this is incredible. Like, I've loved getting into the entertainment business, but all of that is to power something that ultimately would be between me and a consumer, so that we can build something that is a standalone and can reach them directly versus only promoting other brands. Like Your Rich BFF, ultimately, I want that to be a brand that people can work with and, utilize in their everyday lives.
And that's a perfect spot to end, I think.
Yeah.
I want to thank Vivian too, Your Rich BFF. Check out her podcast, Net Worth and Chill. And obviously on social media, everywhere you look.
Your Rich BFF. Bye, guys.